It is a very special pleasure for me to introduce Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of the Republic of South Africa. Mr. President, you know we have a long-standing history of relationship, I would say, of partnership and of friendship with your country. And we are so pleased that after some years you are back with us. And we welcome you actually in two capacities. First, you are president now of a national union government, and you really are embarking into using the full potential of South Africa, which, after all, is the economically strongest country on the African continent. And we all know that the African continent will be probably on the top priority list of global attention in the future. So we are looking very much forward to how your program to address particularly also infrastructure issues, reconstruction issues, what you will tell us about those programs. But second, and I would say particularly important today, is your presidency this year of the G20. We have a world which has a tendency not only to fall into two parts between the US and China, but we also have a tendency to fall into two parts between what is called the New South and the traditional, let's say, transatlantic or Western countries coming together in the G7. And here the G20 plays a very important role as a linking pin. And particularly, I think this year, this linking pin will be of utmost importance. So we welcome you in those two capacities. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Schwab. To all of you who are here present, greetings. We want to start off by thanking the World Economic Forum for giving South Africa this opportunity to outline what you requested us to do, what our priorities and objectives are for our presidency of the G20 that will be held in Johannesburg in November. But I also want to thank Professor Schwab for availing this opportunity to us. As you know, South Africa's G20 presidency follows on the heels, and may I say the hot and very successful heels of the G20 presidency last year of Brazil. And it will take place ahead of the G20 presidency of the United States of America, which has just inaugurated its president. Now, as a leading forum for international economic cooperation, the G20 is an institution that plays an important role in shaping the economic architecture of the world, as well as various economic institutions in the world. For the first time in the history of the G20, it will be hosted on the African continent, particularly following the admission of the African Union as a member of the G20. So we are rather pleased by this. It is a very important and most significant moment for South Africa, as well as for the African continent. But may I add, I would suggest that for the world as well, because it was in Africa where humans developed the capacity and the impulse for cooperation. Cooperation has been one of the key markers of human development, touching on many aspects of human life, survival, social organization, technological and cultural progress, which is what the G20 was established for, to foster cooperation and to deal with challenges that the world faces. So cooperation is the bedrock of human civilization. Because without cooperation and collaboration between individuals, groups of individuals, peoples around the world and nations, humanity simply cannot progress. Now, as we confront the challenges of the 21st century, from climate change to pandemics, to addressing the challenge of poverty, to terrorism, from migration to artificial intelligence, we are in many ways once again called upon to harness that most powerful and most enduring of human attributes, mutually beneficial cooperation and collaboration. This, I believe, is a time of rising geopolitical tensions, unilateralism, nationalism, protectionism, and isolation, rising debt levels, particularly affecting poor countries in the world, and also importantly, the declining of a sense of common purpose. Yet, this is a moment when we should be standing together as a global community to resolve the problems that confront humanity by ending the wars and conflicts that are causing such hardship and misery to many people around the world. We are also called upon by the exigency of the moment to act together with greater urgency to halt the destruction of our planet. Now, this is a moment when we should harness also the abundant resources we collectively possess and the remarkable technologies that human ingenuity has produced to overcome poverty, to overcome inequality, unemployment, and especially youth unemployment, and the abuse of women once and for all. 33 years ago, the founding president of democratic South Africa, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, spoke here at Davos, and he said, "Our interdependence, bringing us together into a common global home across the oceans and the continents, demands that we all combine to launch a global offensive for development, for prosperity, and human survival." In pursuit of this objective, and in giving effect to the mission of achieving or implementing what Nelson Mandela said, the mission of the G20 South Africa will focus on three themes: solidarity, inequality, and sustainable development. It is South Africa's firm view that these themes can best be taken forward through the collective actions of a number of institutions like the G20, as well as various multilateral organizations, such as the United Nations, the World Trade Organizations, the World Health Organizations, financial institutions of the world, some of which should be reformed and be made more representative and responsive to the needs of the citizens of the world. We will seek to get the G20 to focus more on how we can enhance solidarity through collective efforts to ensure that in the pursuit of progress in the world, and progress for all, no person and no country should be left behind. The rights and freedoms of one people cannot really be separated from the rights and freedoms of all people in the world. This is the foundation on which solidarity is built, and we will seek to spread this message and get it fully embraced by the G20. One of the greatest impediments to growth, to development, and to stability is the persistence of inequality within and between nations. The pursuit of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal on reducing inequality is as much an economic imperative as it is a social imperative. As the G20, we need deliberate as well as coordinated efforts to focus on inclusive growth based on responsive trade and investment to grow the incomes of poor countries and the poorest in society, and to ensure equal access to opportunities, especially to women and young people in the world who are the most badly affected by lack of progress. For nations to flourish, equality and prosperity must be available to everyone, regardless of gender, of race, religious belief, or economic status. In addition to huge gaps in economic capabilities and levels of human development, countries in the global south face a lack of predictable financing development, as well as climate change. They also face high levels of debt, and they are vulnerable to pandemics. Debt sustainability for low-income countries is one of the 4 priorities of South Africa's G20 presidency. In the world we inhabit today, the pursuit of equality and the practice of solidarity cannot be separated from sustainable development. We need to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It is therefore in the interest of all countries that they should act together and act with greater urgency to reduce global emissions, and for industrialized countries to support the climate actions that poorer countries or nations must necessarily take in line with the support of the decisions of the UN climate change summits, right from COP that was held in Paris, right through to the recent one. Another of South Africa's priorities for its G20 presidency is therefore to finance and to mobilize the just energy transition, to mobilize finance, that is. We will seek agreement on increasing the quality and quantity of climate finance flows to developing economies, as agreed at the various UN climate summits. We will continue to call on global financial institutions on the redirection of special drawing rights which are left unused to a large extent. It is simply, in our view, not fair that over 60% of special drawing rights go to a handful of wealthy countries. And these drawing rights should be redirected to enable countries in Africa and other parts of the global south to realize their developmental aspirations, to enable them to invest in infrastructure, in industrial development, in education, in training, and in healthcare. We need to leverage private capital and use innovative forms of finance, as well as taxation, to raise additional resources for sustainable development in various countries in the global south. Now, global finance institutions should help to de-risk and support more financing for emerging and developing countries. We need to support country initiatives that are aimed at addressing climate change, such as the Just Energy Transition Partnership that South Africa has entered into with a number of countries of the global north. A number of other countries followed suit and also structured their own initiatives. But these need to be financed. As we accelerate the transition to low-carbon economies in a manner that is just and inclusive, we must also at the same time recognize the damage that climate change has already done and will continue to wreak around the world. In light of this, South Africa has therefore made the strengthening of disaster resilience as another of the priorities of its G20 presidency. The increasing rate of climate-induced natural disasters is affecting countries that can least afford the costs of recovery and rebuilding. And these disasters are also happening in developed economy countries. We've seen how in America the fires are raging, and even in Europe how floods have also caused a lot of devastation. But countries in the global north can recover quickly because of the economic strength that they have. But in order to address the challenges that countries in the global south face, we believe that special financing and insurance mechanisms must be made available to scale up the funding for post-disaster reconstruction. Since the dawn of the industrial age, the benefits to humanity of economic growth have been achieved at the cost of environmental destruction. If we are to survive and to thrive as humanity, we must change this. We must change course. We must pursue development pathways that reconcile growth with urgent climate action. Another of South Africa's priorities for its G20 presidency is to harness critical minerals for inclusive growth and development. We need a G20 framework on green industrialization and investments to ensure progress towards a grand bargain that promotes value addition to critical minerals, particularly close to the source of extraction. We also need the development of low-carbon manufacturing value chains which can support decarbonization and industrial development. There is a need to promote beneficiation and local value addition of resources at source, resulting in an additive rather than an extractive relationship. As minerals extraction accelerates to match the needs of the energy transition, the countries and local communities that are endowed with these rich resources must be the ones that benefit most. At the moment, they don't benefit much because the benefit flows out of their own countries to other locales in the world. We will use this G20 to champion the use of critical minerals through a program of green industrialization and as an engine for growth and development in Africa and the rest of the global south. As this will be the first G20 summit that is held in Africa, it is for us a valuable platform to demonstrate Africa's promise. Many agree that Africa is the next frontier of global growth and productivity. The African continent has an unrivaled natural resource endowment with the youngest population of all continents. Africa continues to be an expanding market for goods and services. The African Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to really change the economic and social fortunes of our continent. We will seek G20 support for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Adjustment Fund that will enhance inclusive growth, sustainable and regional integration as well. We will look to consolidate various G20 initiatives related to Africa into a flagship agreement for cooperation that is focused on implementation of investments in productive sectors in Africa in areas such as infrastructure. Many of you would know that infrastructure is propelling Africa's growth at the moment. We seek investments in development of skills that will also fuel this infrastructure revolution, particularly for Africa's youth and the economic empowerment of the women of our continent. In the health sector, we would want the G20 to support the production of pharmaceutical products such as therapeutics, as well as vaccines to deal with pandemics. The digitization of the continent, particularly when it comes to artificial intelligence, will enhance trade and development, and they are key enablers that we want to see fully developed. Through its G20 presidency, South Africa is well positioned as a country to advance global cooperation and to build partnerships for growth as well as for development. This is so because South Africa has a rich history of inclusive dialogue and common action. Over the last few years, the South African government has been working very closely with social partners in business in South Africa and with labor and with civil society to address the key national challenges that face our country, as well as to drive inclusive growth. And this cooperation culture and the approach that we have developed over many years has taken us to a higher level. And with the establishment, particularly of the Government of National Unity that you referred to, following the elections that were held in May last year, the Government of National Unity, or the GNU as we call it, made up of 10 political parties, a government that we were able to set up in exactly 4 weeks, when many other countries, particularly in the global north, take up to 1 year, and we did it in just 30 days. So this has been vital to stability as well as inclusive governance in our country, and has largely contributed to greater interest amongst investors in South Africa's economic prospects. And I do believe that some of those investors who are having a fresh look at South Africa are also here, and we are going to be interacting with them. The seeds of human progress were sown in Africa. In Africa, the earliest forms of cooperation were forged and developed. As the leaders of the G20 return to Africa, we make a call that we all harness these essential capabilities that will make us take action to build a better and a fairer world. We intend that the G20 in Johannesburg this year should really be a forum where cooperation and collaboration amongst the leading economies of the world will be taken to a higher level. Acting together, we should build an inclusive, just, and equal world in which all may prosper, leaving no one and no country behind. So I look forward, Professor, to welcoming you to the G20 in Johannesburg later this year. And even if you do not participate, any of you do not participate in any of the 130 G20-related meetings, because that's how the G20 works. It builds up to the Leaders' Summit, which will be held later in the year through the various meetings in finance stream and trade stream and many others, I'd like to invite you to come, even if you do not participate in any of these meetings, just to come to South Africa and come and see South Africa for yourself, the most beautiful country in the world. So I invite you to come, and thank you very much.
Mr. President, you have shown us in a very comprehensive way what you want to achieve, a better and more inclusive and more sustainable world under your leadership at the G20. And I can promise you I will be in South Africa. But we spoke about the potential and the role of the G20. We have very little time, and I want to acknowledge the strong participation of your government, which gives an opportunity to follow up on many of those issues and many of the opportunities of cooperation with your country. But to conclude our session, I just have one question, very simple question. Mr. President, if you would explain to a major foreign investor why he should invest into South Africa at this particular moment. 3 reasons.
I would say, besides it being the most beautiful country in the world, I would say...
I agree, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And you do come for holidays as well. There are quite a number of reasons, and some of those reasons are just to come to see the progress that we have been making. After years of some decline, we've been making progress in implementing our reforms. We've embarked on a major program of economic reforms, and of course the political stability that we are now forging ahead with supports those reforms, and we're focusing on economic growth, job creation, and making our country more attractive to investors. Many people are now saying we are now prepared to look at South Africa anew because we have resolved our energy crisis. We went through a debilitating energy crisis. A few months ago, we've now gone through almost a year without having any blackouts. And a number of countries around the world do have their own blackouts, but ours was a major crisis. We've solved that, and largely through the reforms that we've embarked upon to reform our energy sector, and we're also reforming our governance as well as dealing with the corruption levels that had risen to a high level, and we are addressing that. And in sorting out our governance, we do believe that we make South Africa a lot more attractive. And I do want to lay stress on the partnership that we have crafted with business, with labor, and various community organizations is a solid one. And it's a compact that we've put together that is helping us as a country to address many, many challenges. There aren't many countries that I know of in the world where there is long-term cooperation between business, labor, and government at such a close range. And we can count many areas where progress is being made in that regard. And that talks to stability, and that talks to promise for greater economic governance, greater economic growth that South Africa is now leading the way in. And also the important role that we play as a country with regard to our continent, particularly when it comes to trade. We are the most industrialized country on the continent and continue to say that we are the gateway into Africa. by dint of being the most industrialized country, and with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, that opens up many opportunities for investors to utilize our country, and without downplaying any country on the continent and other countries as well, to be the launchpad of their investment processes. So South Africa is ready for investments, and we are pregnant with great promise going forward as a country.
Thank you, Mr. President. We wish you a continuation, and I may say, and certainly I'm correct in saying so, an acceleration of your successful path, using the full potential of South Africa and the continent, and all our best wishes accompany you for achieving the results which you have described to us in your G20 presidency. Ladies and gentlemen, let's express our appreciation for the presence of the President of South Africa, of the Republic of South Africa, and the G20 here this afternoon. Thank you.